Welcome to our channel, the Ministry of the Real Truth. We were presented with a great question in our comment section the other day, or a couple of days ago. So we are replying to that person in particular. They know who they are. They asked us, why was there a need? Can you explain why there was a need for modern translations after the King James Version? Yeah, in our own opinion, we can say this. Here's a King James Version. It's not the new King James Version, which is in modern English. Okay, and you'll find out why we critique this as we do. Okay, these older ones always have that dedication letter to the then Prince James in the front of it. Okay, these are like 1967 to 1968 or 66 to 68 translations of modern translations of this particular Bible, the King James from 1611. Okay, published in around about 1968. It's falling apart. It's very, very old. Okay, we'll have a look at that later. But the reason why we think they needed new translations, besides King James not liking the Puritan Bible, and he demanded a new translation in English for the people, and he authorised it for the churches of England. He didn't say, right, hereby being the king, I authorise this, China, Africa, New Zealand, Australia, America, that this is the only Bible that you're going to read in your churches. I catch you reading anything else, you're in for it. Right? He didn't say that, so if you have some sort of evangelist or church leader says this is the only one that's supposed to be preached or authorised to be preached in all the churches of the world, tell them, what have you been eating? What have you been smoking? Because you're way off. Okay? It's a complete fabrication. Alright, so we're going to give an example here. If we can find one that suits this critique. Okay, we're going to use Judges 20 verse 37 as an example. And the liars in wait, that's L-I-E-R-S, in wait hasted and rushed upon Gibeah, and the liars in wait drew themselves along and smote all the city with the edge of the sword. Now there was an appointed sign between the men of Israel and the liars in wait, that they should make a great flame, etc., etc. Okay, that's a little bit, it's not quite what we're looking at. Okay, we might jump to Isaiah or something like that so you get the idea. Okay, here we go. Nehemiah 9:27. Therefore thou deliverest them into the hands of their enemies who vexed them, and in the time of their trouble, when they cried unto thee, thou heardest them from heaven, and according to thy manifold mercies thou gavest them saviours who saved them out of the hand of their enemies. But after they had rest, they did evil again before thee. Therefore leftest thou them in the hand of their enemies, so that they had dominion over them. Yet when they returned and cried unto thee, thou heardest them from heaven, and many times didst thou deliver them according to thy mercies. Okay. This Shakespeare speak, Romeo and Juliet speak, right? Which can be confusing, because the thous, those, didst, hearest, findest, all that sort of talk, right? Supposedly it was designed, it's been designed that way to keep you confused. That's just what we came across. Okay, but it's in Shakespeare speak, so there is some confusion. There can be some confusion there, and take things out of context, right? So later on, a new King James Version was created and then published in modern English. Made it a hell of a lot easier for certain people, Christians, etc., to read and understand it. This is what they've said to us. Okay, so I had this William Shakespeare, who was on part of the committee of the 42 or 70 or whatever, to this revised version, this new version, English version, authorised by King James to be read in the churches of England, all across England, okay, because he didn't like the Puritan Bible version, and at the time the Roman Catholics were ruling the land, and according to the dedication letter in the beginning of these old 67, 68, 66, 67, 68 republishings, it tells you there that they were suppressed, oppressed, etc. They wanted to know what the Bible said, etc., etc., but these the Vatican or the Roman Catholic Church suppressed them on that, gave them a hard time, and so forth. And he comes along and he freed them, booted them out, ousted them out, the Roman Catholic Church, the Vatican, the Pope, etc. Right, got rid of that and established the churches of England and probably Protestantism, right, Protestant Church, etc. And the people were really grateful, so they gave him this thank you letter. Okay. But yeah, that was the problem. It was in Shakespeare speak. Apparently Shakespeare and Francis Bacon were on the panel. Right, there was no Roman Catholics allowed on there apparently, according to the history. And they translated it into English. They made this new revised English version for the people and for that Church of England, authorised by King James, etc., etc. Right, so that's the reason why you've got a modern translation today. But if you had a look at the video we'll probably put up on the end screen from the Brian guy with the massive beard now and the glasses, he did the research, and he'll show in one column that way back that originally the texts were in Hebrew, then translated to Greek, and then they were translated into the old Germanic language, and the monk Martin Luther, who was a German Roman Catholic monk, translated scribe, etc., translated it into Old Latin, and then from Old Latin over time it went into Old English, Middle English, okay, Shakespeare speak, and then later on, because of this problem, thee, thou, thou, didst, whattest, whatever, people getting confused, taking things out of context, there was a demand from different Bible committees and societies to create a more palatable English version. Okay, so you'd find that history. Let's use this NIV for example of these people in the information. If it has an information section here, preface, right, as the NIV here does. So we highlighted it because they are important factors. Okay, and in the preface it says the New International Version is a completely new translation of the Holy Bible made by over 100 scholars working directly from the best available Hebrew, Aramaic and Greek text. Okay, it has had its beginnings in 1965 when, after several years of exploratory study by committees from the Christian Reformed Church and the National Association of Evangelicals, a group of scholars met at Palos Heights, Illinois, USA, and concurred in a need for a new translation of the Bible in contemporary English, or today's modern English, right? This group, though not made up of official church representatives, was trans-denominational. There was many of them, but like the Anglicans, the Lutherans, and so forth. Its conclusion was endorsed, it was funded by a large number of leaders, or promoted, that should be done, by a large number of leaders from many denominations who met in Chicago in 1966. Responsibility for the new version was delegated by the Palos Heights group to a self-governing body. They made the decisions, right? Come to the end conclusions, etc. A self-governing body of 15, the Committee on Bible Translation, composed for the most part of biblical scholars from colleges, universities and seminaries. In 1967, the New York Bible Society, now the International Bible Society, generously undertook the financial sponsorship of the project. Well, they paid for it, they funded it. a sponsorship that made it possible to enlist the help of many distinguished scholars. Okay? So these guys were supposed recognised experts. The fact that participants from the United States, Great Britain, Canada, Australia and New Zealand worked together gave the project its international scope. That they were from many denominations, including Anglican, Assemblies of God, Baptist Brethren, Christian Reformed, Church of Christ, Evangelical Free, Lutheran, Mennonite, Methodist, Nazarene, Presbyterian, Wesleyan and other churches, helped to safeguard the translation from sectarian bias. Okay. Secondary sources that say how it was made helps to give the New International Version its distinctiveness. The translation of each book was assigned to a team of scholars. Next, one of the intermediate editorial committees revised the initial translation. Okay, so they did a translation, and this committee revised it, looked over it, and revised it with constant reference to the Hebrew, Aramaic, or Greek. The work then went to one of the general editorial committees, which checked it in detail and made another thorough revision. It's a second revision, right? This revision in turn was carefully reviewed by the Committee on Bible Translation, which made further changes and then released the final version for publication. So it went through 3 revisions before it was finally published and released to the public. In this way, the entire Bible underwent 3 revisions, as we just stated, during each of which the translation was examined for its faithfulness to the original languages and for its English style. Okay, so you got to be careful there when they say the original languages. Okay, it's a misnomer. We believe it's a misnomer. Okay, because if they were the original languages, the original ancient, very old languages, used way back, well, they're dead languages. Nobody uses those anymore, such as Old Germanic, Old Greek, Old Norse, etc., etc. So, being dead languages that nobody used anymore, you would have to find a way to resurrect them or revive them. How would you do that? Well, Aramaic, Galilean Aramaic, and Kitab Asheret translator from Bet Nari, Mesopotamia, Syria or Assyria, Victor N. Alexander with 15 years experience, found a way to do that with the he brought a Bible form of the original manuscripts that were hidden by the Church of the East, the original Church of the East founded by Thomas, etc. Right, manuscripts hidden for 2,000 years from the Roman Catholics and the then Mohammedans or Islam. Right, he found a way to translate that, and it's a very, very old, dead language or old tongue. It's known as the Lishana Atika Cypriot of the Assyrian Aramaic, or the Kitab Asheret, which is the sister language of the original ancient, very old Kitab Ivri, or Hebrew. So he had to look at the modern vernacular, or the modern language, the modern version of Aramaic, at the root words. He states on his website, it's down, we resurrected it, we've done videos on it, that you could use these root words to translate that old dead language, that old tongue, right? That sacred scribal old tongue from 800 BC and 1st AD, 4th, 5th century AD, right? Okay. So that's how he did it, and that's how he brought those Aramaic translations, those manuscripts, into English, so all would know the truth about what the actual scriptures say. Trying to keep as faithful to what those original manuscripts actually said, and the nearest English equivalent where possible, because sometimes words in Aramaic don't have an English equivalent, so you have to go running around. For example, like Milta, they had to run around and find out the closest, the nearest English equivalent, which was manifestation, which would apply to Jesus the Christ. It's like saying he was with God, he was in the company of God, etc. There was God. No, everyone knew about God, but they'd never seen God. They can't look upon God. They haven't seen His face, etc. Because if they did, as Scripture says, they'll die, right? Because He's too glorious, righteous, holy, pure, whatever, right? So this manifestation, okay, wasn't revealed at the time, okay, but it is revealed throughout these ancient Old Testament sacred scribe manuscripts, etc., tongue, whatever, right? Okay, these scriptures, that he's always been there, but he comes out from the midst of God, goes incarnate in the flesh, dies amongst men, tells them the good news, and as he states in the scriptures, if you've seen me, you've seen God, because I and the Father are one. So he's like this spirit form manifested, incarnated in the flesh, revealed through the flesh, etc., etc., according to the scriptures, right? Because it goes right back to Moses. Moses saw him according to these ancient manuscripts, not in a burning bush, talking through a burning bush, but in some sort of flying disc. He saw these three beings, right, in there, and he knew one of them was God, and he did not look at him. Okay. So when they say in churches, Moses saw God, he looked upon God, his hair went white, it's actually incorrect, because in the Eastern mindset, when they say he saw God, the people say, he must have been, he saw God, he must have saw God. It means that he was in the presence of God, right? He didn't actually look upon God, but because he was in the presence of God, midst of God, or basically in the presence of God, his hair turned white. So that was a sign that he had seen God. Okay, he hadn't looked upon him, but he had been in their presence. That's what it means. It's a different Eastern mindset, right, compared to the Western mindset and understanding. Okay, so it's got more information on why they had to make this translation. And working towards these goals, to translate these scriptures from the supposed original languages, and working towards these goals, the translators were united in their commitment to the authority and infallibility of the Bible as God's word in written form. They believe that it contains a divine answer to the deepest needs of humanity, and so forth, so forth. The first concern of the translators has been the accuracy of the translation and its fidelity to the thoughts of the biblical writers. They have weighed the significance of the lexical and grammatical details of the Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek texts. At the same time, they have striven for more than a word-for-word translation, because thought patterns and syntax differ from language to language. Faithful communication of the meaning of the writers of the Bible demands frequent modifications in sentence structure and constant regard for the contextual meaning of words. Okay, there's plenty more information there. Okay, so what source did they use? What reference did they use? For the Old Testament, the standard Hebrew text, the Masoretic text as published in the latest editions of Biblica Hebraica, was used throughout. The Dead Sea Scrolls contain material bearing on an earlier stage of the Hebrew text. They were consulted, as were the Samaritan, Pentateuch, and the ancient scribal traditions relating to textual changes. Sometimes a variant Hebrew reading in the margin of the Masoretic text was followed instead of the text itself. Such instances, being variants within the Masoretic text tradition, are not specified by footnotes, and so forth. So that's a history of why they felt they needed to put out a new translation. Okay, that's the NIV. We have the New Jerusalem Bible, which possibly is Roman Catholic. Not too sure on that one. If it has an apocrypha in it, maybe. It doesn't look like it has. Hang on. It has some extra books in here. Yeah, I think it might have the apocrypha in here. It has the Baruch, introduction to Ezekiel. Okay, it doesn't look like it's. Doesn't look like it has. Oh yeah, it has Tobit. Yes, probably got the apocrypha in there. Yeah, the Jerusalem Bible. Okay, with abridged introductions and notes. So we have a look at the editor's foreword. When the Jerusalem Bible was first published in English in 1966, the foreword to the complete standard edition announces objects to serve two pressing needs facing the church: the need to keep abreast of the times and the need to deepen theological thought. This double program was carried out by translating the ancient text into the language we use today. The ancient text, okay, is that like the very, very old, dead language text, right? From those old tongues. into the language we use today, modern English, and by providing notes to the text which were neither sectarian nor superficial. It's basically what the NIV was saying, to keep it free from sectarian bias. In that forward, also the dependence of the translators on the original pioneer work of the School of Biblical Studies in Jerusalem was acknowledged, and the English version was offered as an entirely faithful rendering of the original text, and so forth, so forth. Okay. Have typographical notes. Then go straight to the Bible, the Old Testament. So basically, they felt the need for another new translation for their various reasons. Okay, so that's the New Jerusalem Bible. We have this, just the New King James Version here. Okay, these are quite old. Picked them up from places. They're pretty old, tatty. Let's just have an introduction here. Publisher's foreword. For the past several centuries, English-speaking peoples have cherished the King James Bible, a version of the Bible. Love for this monumental work does not arise merely from a sentiment for tradition. Rather, the King James Version inevitably has become a tradition because of its acknowledged scholarship, literary excellence, and devotional quality. During its long history, the translation has been revised. It's been revised in accordance with changes in English speech. Right? You have to keep up with the modern English, right? Because it evolves, languages evolve. And our growing knowledge of the original text of the scriptures. Okay, so what is the original text of the scriptures in this context? Previous major revisions were prepared in 1629, 1638, 1762, and 1769. So it's gone through changes, right? Because the English language evolved, etc. It is our hope that the present volume, the fifth major revision of the King James Version, will preserve for our own time the most revered Bible of the English-speaking world. Okay. The King James Version. In the summer of 1603, when King James was on his way to London to receive the English crown, he was a Scotsman, right? He was then a prince. He was presented with a petition of grievances by clergy holding Puritan convictions, an action that led the king to call a conference for the hearing and for the determining things pretend to be amiss in the church. Okay, so they're going to get together and write a better English version, because these clergy had their reservations against that Puritan version. The conference was convened for 3 days, January 14 to 16, 1604, and was known as the Hampton Court Conference. During this conference, Dr. John Reynolds, the leader of the Puritan party and the president of Corpus Christi College, Oxford, made the motion that a new translation of the Bible be undertaken. Okay. Though the majority present were against the motion, it appealed to the king, and he ordered that such a translation be prepared. 54 of the best biblical scholars in Great Britain were brought together for this great task, divided into 6 groups, 3 to work on a translation of the Old Testament, and 3 on the New Testament. 2 groups for the Old and New Testaments were to meet at Oxford, 2 of Cambridge, and 2 at Westminster. The resulting English translation, often called the Authorized Version, made its debut in 1611. Although never actually endorsed by king or parliament, the work soon made its own way to a position of primary acceptance among clergy and laity. It continues to hold that position after more than 3 centuries. A New King James Version. In the latter part of the 19th century, F.H.A. Scrivener observed that the King James Bible, quote, so laborious, so generally accurate, so close, so abhorrent of paraphrase, so grave and weighty in word and rhythm, so intimately bound up with the religious convictions of the English people, will never yield its hard-earned supremacy, save to some referential and well-considered revision of which it has been adapted as the basis, that shall be happy enough to retain its characteristic excellence, while amending its venial or trifling errors and supplying its unavoidable defects. So it had errors and defects according to this guy F.H.A. Scrivener. In 1975, Thomas Nelson, publisher's successor to the British firm that had first published the English Revised Version, 1885, the American Standard Version 1901, and the Revised Standard Version 1952, determined to evaluate interest in a possible new revision. So they were calling for another revised version. Another revision of the King James Version, because any revision of the scriptures must meet the needs of public worship, Christian education, and personal reading and study. Leading clergymen and lay Christians were invited to meetings in Chicago, Illinois, USA, and Nashville, Tennessee, USA in 75, and in London, England in 76, to discuss the need for revision. Almost 100 church leaders from a broad spectrum of Christian churches strongly supported commencement of a new revision. Work was begun immediately. Biblical scholars representing a cross-selection of evangelical Christendom were selected to work on this major project. And here's the kicker, like the NIV said in the foreword preface, work was begun immediately. Biblical scholars representing a cross-section of evangelical Christendom were selected to work on this major project. They came from England, Scotland, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, and the Netherlands and Taiwan, as well as from the United States, so that the new King James Version would reflect internationally accepted English usage. Each translator worked privately and independently recommended changes in the King James text. Translators of the Old Testament used the Biblia Hebraica Stuttgartensia. We have that book outside. I think it's the Wittenberg, isn't it? Something like that. While the Scrivener Greek text was the basis of the New Testament. In the 1769 revision of the New King James Version, the edition in general use today was the English language text that guided the new revision process. The translator's work was then submitted to the executive editor for the Old or New Testament. Word studies of the English, Greek, and Hebrew, and an elaborate concordance were prepared especially for this revision by the executive editors and the associates, using the original text, and what were they? The King James Bible, and carefully establishing guidelines. The executive editor for the Old or New Testament reviewed each scholar's work. Where necessary, they made recommendations for further changes, or in some cases, or restoration of the King James reading. Each book was then submitted to the English editor to be checked for grammatical accuracy, literary beauty, and the effective communication of the content. So it might have gone through 3 revisions like that NIV did. Each book was then submitted to the English editor to be checked. To be checked for grammatical accuracy, literary beauty, and effective communication of the content. Throughout the entire editorial process, the work was regularly reviewed by the clergy and lay advisors who served on the British and North American overview committees. The final exhaustive review process was carried out by a separate executive review committee for each testament over a period of 4 years. All proposed changes by translators, editors, and reviewers were considered during this time, including final alterations proposed by committee members. The review process was completed in July 1981 at St Andrews University in North East Scotland, not far from Stirling Castle, King James' historic residence. During part of the time, the North American Committee was joined in its activity by the distinguished members of the British Overview Committee. The New King James Version, thus prepared with profound reverence for the Word of God and with deep appreciation of the wise traditions established by the translators of 1611. It is the prayer of the current revisers that the work in which they laboured may indeed be, as Dr. Scrivener said years before, a reverential and well-considered revision, retaining the characteristic excellence of the King James Bible. And it has a preface. Yeah. Right next to that. Probably hard to see. It has preface. Okay. It says in the preface to the 1611 edition, the translators of the Authorized Version, known popularly as the King James Bible, state that it was not their purpose to make a new translation, but to make a good one better. Indebted to the earlier works of William Tyndale, take note, look at the end screen video, the Brian guy with the big beard, right, as he goes through it and tells you where that who that William Tinsdale was, and where that translation came from and where it led to your modern Americanized Bibles today. Indebted to the earlier work of William Tyndale and others, they saw their best contribution to consist in revising and enhancing the excellence of the English version, which had sprung from the Reformation. Okay, we'll read that again. Indebted to the earlier work of William Tyndale and others, they saw their best contribution to consist in revising and enhancing the excellence of the English versions, which had sprung from the Reformation. Okay, don't forget Martin Luther was a Roman Catholic, and he and perhaps this Tyndale started the Reformation. They looking at the Mother Church, the Holy Mother Church, the Roman Catholic Church, and they realised it needs to make some changes because people weren't allowed to learn the Latin to be able to read the Bible, etc. Okay, he didn't like that idea, so yeah, he got up and protested, wanted Reformation. That's why he is called the father of Reformation, and the Protestants movement, right? That's what started the Protestant movement, who were still faithful to that Roman Catholic Church, and you've got excommunicated. Some might have got burnt, martyred, whatever, for speaking up, speaking against that church. Okay, whereas Martin Luther never got excommunicated apparently, while his friend got martyred. Yeah. Okay, so that sprung up from the Reformation of the 16th century. In harmony with the purpose of the King James scholars, the translators and editors of the present work have not pursued a goal of innovation. See, they weren't allowed on the panel when King James did a revision. Right, he wanted a new English version. They were kept off it so they wouldn't put their 50 cents worth in there, right, and stuff things up. Okay, I think maybe the clergy, the people, the laymen, didn't want that either. Okay, in harmony with the purpose of the King James scholars, the translators and editors of the present work have not pursued a goal of innovation. They have perceived the Holy Bible, New King James Version, as a continuation of the labours of the earlier translators, thus unlocking for today's readers the spiritual treasures found especially in the authorised version of the Holy Scriptures. Living legacy. They go on. The King James translators were committed to producing an English Bible that would be a precise translation and by no means a paraphrase or a broadly approximate rendering. On the one hand, the scholars were almost as familiar with the original languages. Okay, were they? Really? The ancient, very old Kitab Ashrit, Assyrian Aramaic, the Kitab Ivri, the original ancient, very old Hebrew, okay, and the Koine Greek. Okay. The King James translators were committed to producing an English Bible that would be a precise translation and by no means paraphrase or a broadly approximate rendering. On the other hand, the scholars were almost as familiar with the original languages of the Bible as with their native English. On the other hand, their reverence for the divine author and his word assured a translation of the scriptures in which only a principle of utmost accuracy could be accepted. In 1786, Catholic scholar, take note, Roman Catholic scholar Alexander Geddes said of the King James Bible, if accuracy and strict attention be the letter of the text, to the letter of the text be supposed to constitute an excellent version, this is of all versions the most excellent. George Bernard Shaw became a literary legend in our century because of his severe and often humorous criticisms of our most cherished values. Surprisingly, however, Shaw pays the following tribute to the scholars commissioned by King James. The translation was extraordinarily well done because to the translators what they were translating was not merely a curious collection of ancient books written by different authors in different stages of culture, but the Word of God, divinely revealed through his chosen and expressly inspired scribes. In this conviction they carried out their work with boundless reverence and care and achieved a beautifully artistic result. History agrees with these estimates, therefore, while seeking to unveil the excellent form of the traditional English Bible, and so forth. Okay. There's plenty more there. Explanation of format, and so forth. Then it goes to the Old Testament. Okay. Keep in mind that this is the New King James Version, okay, or the New King James Version, okay, which came out at a certain period, era, right, time, okay. So that's basically it. They keep calling for new modern translations because languages evolve. To keep up with the times, keep up with that evolving, ever evolving English language. And what they've basically done, okay, they've translated it using Americanized English. Okay, have a look at this in-screen video of Brian with the big beard, and he explains it. Go through it, he'll explain it. That all came from the Roman Catholic Church. You have one column for all the Roman Catholic the scribes, monks, translators, such as Martin Luther, then Tyndale, Wycliffe, etc., etc., all on the left-hand column. On the right-hand column, where's the Textus Receptus, where's the King James Version, the Waldeans, etc., etc. Brian goes through all that. There's nothing there. Okay, it's all coming from the Roman Catholic Church, as you'll see in that video. Right. So these new King James Version, these new international versions, new ESR, RSV, ABC, whatever, they're all coming from Roman Catholic Church, all Roman Catholic corrupted, supposedly corrupted translations, etc., etc. Sometimes in these versions they have the Apocrypha. That's their whole plan these days, apparently, is to put the Apocrypha in there. Maybe the New World Order's going to change some words, leave out some passages. There's the American evangelist Stephen Anderson, and that Hoffman guy say, right, the guy looks like Jim of Lost, remember that old series? Yeah, and they've put in there one of the passages where it says there will come a time for a new day or a better day or something like that. They've changed it to there will come a time for a new world order, all that sort of stuff, right? Because then people will go, oh, well, this is the holy word of God, it's never been corrupted, all that sort of stuff. Even if it had that new world order in there, right, they'd say, oh, that's, you know, that's how it's translated, and you know, this is all divine and it's not contradictory. None of that rubbish, right? And they'll believe whatever it says in there. Like a New World Order could say, well, God said, you know, give us all your money, you know, give us all your possessions, then go top yourself off, right? And people, something like that, they'll change it, whatever, right? And people go, oh yeah, that's what God said. That's what I'm going to go do it, you know, it's a command. Well, that sort of crap, they're mucky around, right? Whatever, right? Okay, so they're all stemming from the Roman Catholic Church. If you have a look at that video, Brian with the big beard, right? Except for the King James Version 1611, they couldn't mess with that. Okay, up until it got to a certain time period where they created New King James, the new King James Version, the new International Version, the new this, the new that, right? Okay, and they're trying to put the Apocrypha in there. So be aware of that. We have confronted Christians, revealing them this truth, and they're like, oh no, my NIV doesn't come from there. Where's your proof? So I say, well, come to my house and I'll show you all the evidence, all the research I've done, right? Okay? The Brian video, whatever. And you'll be blown out of your socks. And then make some excuse, oh, I've got to go down the road and preach to somebody else. You know, or my brother's picking me up. You watch them, see what they're actually up to. An hour later, they're still out there trying to convert. Yeah, so much for your brother picking you up. But yeah, hopefully that answers the guy's question. Languages, the English language evolves over time, so they've got to keep up with that. So they feel that they need to make a new revision, a new English version, a better English version, and someone comes out with something else and something else and something else. So you end up with like 30,000 different versions of the Bible, all saying something or sometimes something similar or something completely different. People come out with wacky ideas. They're taking everything out of context. They start calling themselves Yahweh, or they're a son of God. They're a son of God, but they're a son of God. It was only for one particular race. Like if you're not part of it, well, it's not for you because you're not of that race. All this sort of crap, right? So that's why we at the Ministry of the Real Truth put out the videos on the supposed original, ancient, very old, sacred scribal, old tongue language, manuscriptures, translated in English by a native-born Aramaic speaker and translated from Bet Naharain, Mesopotamia, from Syria, right? Okay, because he's done his homework. Okay, and it saves a hell of a lot of confusions. When you're reading these English versions, okay, so Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, that's all, nobody else. Okay, Cain runs off, or goes into another land, and apparently he has a wife. Who was his wife? It must have been his sister, right? That's incest. Goes into another land. He says, after they find me there, someone finds me, they'll kill me. Hang on, Christianity or church has been telling you, or me, since I was knee-high to a grasshopper, that God only created Adam and Eve, and then they had Cain and Abel, and that's it, there's nobody else. Okay? But apparently there's other people in that land, but it doesn't indicate that while they were talking, they had more children who wandered off, ended up in that land, right? Whereas the original Aramaic manuscriptures tell you exactly what was going down, okay? And why he said, if someone in that other land, Nod, the land of wandering, finds me, they'll kill me, okay? Because there was somebody else, a pre-Adamic man created, etc., etc. Okay, you'd have to check out our other videos on that, the theory of the Aborigine, etc., and more to find out what we're jabbering on about. Okay, so hopefully, person out there with that great question, we've answered it for you. Languages evolve over time, so they've got to keep up to date with them. Okay, languages from way back, ancient days, they're different. A lot of them are no longer used. They're dead languages. Okay, those languages evolved over time, and you end up with a modern vernacular or a modern dialect of that supposed long dead, unused language. So today you are not dealing with the original Aramaic, spoken way back in 800 BCE, etc., by the Old Testament prophets, say Moses, Isaiah, Ezra, etc., and others, or the Galilean Aramaic, spoken by Jesus and his disciples. You've got modern versions of it, which, as we said, languages evolve over time, so you have a different dialect of that, right? You have the Syriac, which is supposed to be a derivative of the original Assyrian Aramaic, etc., etc., Hebrew Aramaic, a Koine Greek, which today the Greek is a Latinized form of Greek. That's why if you look in your Bibles, you'll find there's a lot of words that might have Asia right at the end of it. Check out the definition of Asia, the IA on the end, or Asiatic or something like that, or Pacific or whatever. Check out the ik on the end of it, because they're in suffix. One means people that dwelled in that area, the region. Okay, they were called Arameans, or the Aramaic, right? Because they spoke Aramaic, or they were in Persia. Okay, they were the people who were in the area at the time. Okay, or they spoke some sort of Asiatic, which means that they had this language, right? Let's have a better answer than that. Let's say someone spoke Arabic. There's people that were roaming the deserts of Arabia. Apparently Arabia never existed, because these Greeks went there, or whoever went there, discovered these people were living in that geographical area, that region, right? And they spoke a certain language. So when they went back home, what'd you get up to? We went to this land way over there. And what happened? We found these people that dwelled there, right? And they spoke this language. Okay, they say that their forefather spoke this certain language, right? So what we did was we had to put a title to it, so we put the ik, the loan word, Greek or Latin, on the end of it, okay, to say that they were the people of that area who spoke that language, they possessed that language. Put ear on the end there to say that they're the people that were dwelling in that region where we came across them. Okay, so Arabia, Garabia, etc. didn't actually exist until the Latins or the Greeks. The Greeks went there and used that loan word, adding the ear and the ik on the end, and then the Latins probably picked up on that. Okay, so you have to be careful of what you're reading in here, because it's possibly a Latinized form of Greek translated into English. Okay? Americanized English, not the Queen's English from England, because we here in New Zealand, we speak, what we speak, in English we speak, is regarded as colonial. Okay? It's not the British Empire, the Queen's language, right? And they look at the Americans and say, well, that's not the Queen's English, even though they don't speak the Queen's English. Anyway, they have like Cockney and all that sort of stuff, right? They say, well, they're speaking colloquial, which is completely different. There's a difference between colonial and colloquial. They have a lot of slang, right? And plus they've got African Americans that, they made up jive. They got the hip hop style language, what up, and all that sort of stuff. Okay, so anyway, enough of me. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to our channel, give us a like, leave your comments down below in the comment section there, and then go share this video for your friends, family, strangers, neighbours, church friends, Jewish temple friends, Islamic mosque friends, and all the others.